do not change their orbits, and the luminaries which are in the heaven, how they all rise and set in order, each in its season, and transgress not against their appointed.
Explaining a miracle doesn't make it less of a miracle. It's conceivable, given enough time, that we might one day possess the knowledge of how natural forces could part the Red Sea all by itself. And there are lots of people that try to say how it could have done that by itself, by natural forces. Okay, fine. But it doesn't explain away the miracle, because the miracle was in the timing. The Red Sea parted when Moses lifted up his rod. And then the Red Sea fell back into place the moment Pharaoh's army pursued their Jewish ex-slaves. The miracle was in the timing. The miracle wasn't in just the water standing up. Does that make sense? Because if you understand that, that's how God works in our lives. Most of the miracles we're waiting for is about God orchestrating perfect timing in our lives. And it's beyond anyone else's ability to do such things. So it doesn't really matter once you've had a miracle from God. It doesn't matter what the naysayers say. It doesn't matter how many people doubt it, because I know Jesus saved my life. I know He did it at the time when I needed Him. I know He showed up at certain times when no one else could have been responsible for what happened. And that's what makes me a believer. Not because I can't explain some of the things He does. Sure, we can explain many things. But you can't orchestrate that kind of timing unless you're God. So now we come to Planet X. Get ready. Luke chapter 23, verse 44 to 45. Now it was about the 6th hour, and there was darkness over all the earth until the 9th hour. Then the sun was darkened, and the veil of the temple was torn in two. Matthew 27, verse 51. Then behold, the veil of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. Is it a miracle to tear a veil? Of course not. The miracle was it tore from the top to the bottom. Because if a man did it, it would have torn it from the bottom to the top. See, it's always these things that people say, I can explain things, but God always has one up on humans. So when the veil was torn from top to bottom, the earth quaked and the rocks were split. What's interesting about this is at the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, there was a 3-hour eclipse in our time from noon to 3 p.m., plus an earthquake. Well, how is that possible? Have you ever thought about the fact that God just left us a clue about another planetary body? Why? Because the maximum time that our moon can eclipse the sun is 7 minutes and 31 seconds. Can't do any more than that. How can you have a 3-hour eclipse? Well, it's possible with the flyby of a much larger object, at least 7 times the size of the Earth. In other words, perhaps Planet X. There's always an explanation. The miracle was the timing. Jesus says, it is finished. Gives up the ghost. And then lights out for 3 hours. See, no human being can orchestrate that. Only God can do that. And then an earthquake as well because of the gravitational pull or the electric force. Genesis chapter 7, verse 11 and 24, let me remind you what happened. In the 600th year of Noah's life, this is what people don't know. They thought it just rained for 40 days. It didn't. Number one, it says, God said, all the fountains of the great deep were broken up, and the windows of heaven were open. Which is an interesting phrase. It's not just that it rained. Something broke apart in the heavens, and something broke apart in the earth's crust. And the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days. Please say 150 days. Okay, no detail in the Bible is extraneous or superfluous. Everything is there by design. Gives us a clue to something. And by the way, most things happen not once. Almost nothing in the Bible happens once. So everything that happens here is a prelude to something else. Only in Noah's flood, God promised, never going to flood the whole world in the same way. Yet everything usually happens twice. So these details here, they'll be handy in the end times. 150 days. Because guess what? Book of Revelation also says one of the trumpet judgments will last 5 months. 5 months is 5 times 30 days, 150 days. Jewish calendar days are 30 days a month. Very interesting. There's parallels between Genesis and Revelation all the way through. Can't get into all of it. But here's what happened. The Bible is saying the flood was not mere rain for 40 days. It says the canopy of water that was ruptured from above. There was above the atmosphere another layer of water. Remember the firmament separated the waters from the waters in Genesis? There was water above. All right? And that was ruptured, and then it all broke apart and fell down. The earth's crust was also ruptured from below. And 150 days later, the waters receded. Well, how is that possible? Well, if you map out Planet X's orbit, it seems that Planet X has an orbit that crosses the Earth's orbit twice in a period of 150 days. So you see, point 1 is the sun, point 2 is the first crossing of the Earth, point 3 is the second crossing as it leaves the solar system. So here's a scenario that may explain Noah's flood. Planet X crosses the Earth's orbit, and then each encounter brought debris and meteors upon the Earth. So here's the first flyby. On the second Passover, 3000 BC, remember Passover is the only feast where if you missed it, God gave you grace, you can celebrate it a second month, the month later. Well, Noah recorded that on the second Passover, 3000 BC or 5,000 years ago, the waters broke from above the heavens. Well, a meteor shower would have done that, all right? Small meteors would have opened the floodgates of heaven, shattering the upper firmament that divided the waters from the waters. Then, 5 months later, it makes a revolution around the sun, comes back, the earth happens to meet on this occasion. The debris of Planet X, once again, as it exits the solar system and the Earth's orbit. And so this is probably what happened. 150 days later, a second flyby of Planet X drags a 110-mile-wide asteroid into a collision course with Earth. And there's a reason why we have quite an exact figure on the size of this asteroid or this meteor. We'll show you in a moment. But we have to say asteroid because it's so big. Here's a moment of impact. A scientist calculated at a trajectory of 22, or an angle of 22 degrees. There's the moment of impact. It would have sent shock waves into the Earth's core and all throughout the Earth. And that would have ejected some of the Earth's crust, leaving basins of for water to recede into, which today forms our oceans. Something catastrophic happened. Now, science always denies catastrophic events until catastrophic events happen. Did you know that last week an earthquake, 7.7 earthquake in Pakistan, created an island like that? If you don't know, just go on the news and see it. They always say over millions and millions and millions of years, and yet on the news, turn it on, boom, an island just got created. In the same way, something suddenly happened and the waters then receded. Something scientific, something explainable had to have happened. Well, a 110-mile diameter meteor or asteroid would have impacted the Earth, and the Planet X gravitational electric influence would explain the start of Noah's flood, canopy broke, the end of the flood, a meteor came and then ejected some of the crust, which left basins. It would also explain the tilt of the earth, without which we wouldn't have seasons. So at the moment of impact, the earth was pushed 23.5 degrees, which allows for seasons. I always believe in the beginning, God didn't have, there was no rain in the beginning, and there were no seasons in the beginning. Why do we have seasons? Because this impact at Noah's flood tilted the earth. Now we got seasons, winter, summer, and all that. And it would have also cracked the earth into tectonic plates. Does the Bible talk about this? Yes, it does. Isaiah 24, verse 19 and 20. Behold, the Lord makes the earth empty and makes it waste, distorts its surface. Verse 19, the earth is violently broken, the earth is split open, the earth is shaken exceedingly. The earth shall reel to and fro like a drunkard and totter like a hut. That sounds like the earth's 23.5 degree tilt. Planet X could provide a scientific explanation for all these things we observe. The earth's crust is definitely cracked like an eggshell into tectonic plates. What we see on the globe is not exactly the plates. Underneath, they're all cracked. Now, one problem a scientist had with this was that if such a large impact had occurred, the amount of heat that would have been generated would have wiped out all life. That's just the physics of it. And so this person who didn't believe the Bible challenged this other scientist who believes the Bible and says, well, you got a heat problem. It's just impossible that this happened 5,000 years ago. He says, well, how about this? What if the entire surface of the planet was covered in water? Isn't water a perfect conductor of heat? Would have absorbed all the heat. In fact, I saw on the news today, global warming scientists, because they're having a real hard time now explaining global warming. They're saying, oh, well, the ocean is such a good conductor of heat. Global warming is happening. We are responsible, but the oceans have absorbed all the heat. You see, the miracle was the perfect timing. He says, get in the ark. The meteor shower came. Planet X could have passed by. Maybe that's the gravitational force that pushed all these meteors in Noah's way. He got in the ark. He was safe. Then it came. Then the big meteor that helped the waters to recede came at the moment where the entire earth was covered with water, absorbing most of the shock, most of the heat. Amazing? God is amazing. His miracles usually involve perfect timing.
And CO7 is when we run into the debris field 150 days later, towards the end of August. And the scariest part about this is the biblical text says that this is the worst time in Earth's history. Well, knowing Noah's flood and other incidents, this next time is the worst for Earth, then that's very severe.
And Brother Gil, you're not suggesting that it's going to be this year, like this Passover. You're just saying it will be Passover.
No.
Right.
In 2016. There's a date given in Revelation 12:1.
Now, see, I've heard you say about that date. That's something interesting to me, and we might get into that later. I'm definitely interested to hear what you have to say about that, because I know that Revelation 12, we're talking about the sun-clad woman, and you're talking about the 12 stars that are at the crown. You're talking about the moon at her feet, and you're talking about she's being clothed in the sun. Now, when you get down into some of these deeper parts of Revelation, the interpretations can be various. I mean, I've heard so many people say so many different things. You think 2016 is definitely the year, or do you think it's a possibility? Do you think, I remember when we were on the phone, I thought you said to me that until it shows up, this is all just a theory or something to that effect. Are you now thinking that it's absolutely going to be 2016?
I'll put it like this. It greatly concerns me.
Okay.
The reason why is I don't have a crystal ball. I cannot tell you the future. But I can tell you mathematically and astronomically wise, it's impossible for them to pull a date out of thin air 2,000 years ago and have it exactly fall 3.5 days after the Feast of Passover, where Elijah is supposed to announce the groom is coming. You see, 3.5 days prior to this is a full moon on the date given in Revelation 12:1.
Could I just take a minute and read Revelation 12:1, and then we'll talk about it?
Sure.
Okay, let's look at Revelation 12:1. Then I want to get back into the sixth seal. And I do want to say this, Brother Gill. I believe that the sixth seal could be a pole shift. I try not to be dogmatic. I mean,
so I want to point it out to you, the evidence of this impact. It's called the Gulf of Mexico. There's a perfect circular crater left by an impact of an asteroid. Does that look like a perfect circle to you? Pretty much for geography. Compare that to the Arizona crater, which is 0.7 mile wide. The Gulf of Mexico's crater is 1,100 miles wide, and we usually calculate that a meteor is 10% the size of the impact crater. That's why we have quite a good idea of how big this thing was that came at the end of Noah's flood, or as the waters receded. What's interesting is if we take pictures subterranean, sub-ocean pictures, we also can see there's a visible landslide under the ocean. Can you see that? At the top of the circle? The land slid into the ocean in the distant past. And if this has happened before, this area from Houston to Louisiana to New Orleans is a high-risk area for collapse a second time if there was another Planet X pass by. So Houston to New Orleans could be unstable. Also, you know that oil and gas are found in abundance in this area because plant life was buried suddenly by a previous landslide. So 70 to 80% of America's domestic oil and gas flows through the pipelines of this high-risk zone. Now, the shock waves were sent around the world. Is there any evidence of that? Sure there is. It caused an uplift on the other side of the planet. It's called the Himalayan mountain range. Take a look at it. It's a perfect curve. It's the same curve as the Gulf of Mexico sent to the other side.